all you out there in YouTube land, this is Translator10 and I'm back with another action figure review. Because I really did enjoy working on the Spider-Man animated review of Shocker, I decided to go ahead and bring another one out of the closet, so to speak. And, well, this was possibly one of my all-time favorite Spider-Man villains as a kid. And before I start talking into a blank wall, let me just show you what I mean. Here he is, the master of illusion himself, former special effects wizard Quentin Beck turned supervillain Mysterio. This guy was released in the second year of toys in 1995, probably around Wave 4 or Wave 5. And of course, by this time, the cards were becoming a little bit more, basic. Well, you got the Spider-Man logo, you got the Spider-Man perch, you have that really cool looking, sorry about that. You have that really cool looking Mysterio portrait, and you have the cool buildings, but then you have this white field. Instead of the outline, it's just a whole white field. I mean, yellow field. Why I say white? Ugh. The figure itself is, once again, it's another one of those little basic figures with an action feature. Unfortunately, the way that his feet are, he can only stand he can't stand fully erect. Haha, save it for your comments. He does have some articulation, and it's basically the same as Shocker. Since he can't move his head because, you know, his head's basically a fishbowl, he does have your typical arm movement, which can go 360, but you'd have to take the cape off. And he has the bendable elbows, which can mimic the famous Atlanta Braves chop. And he can slightly bend his hips upward, and he does have the knees. And that's pretty much it. Same articulation points as Shocker, except given the elbows in place of the absent head. His color scheme is very much like the original comic book. Now, there is actually two figures of this release. There is the green, and then there is the pastel, like Easter green, which was commonly shown in the animated series. I don't know which one came first, or which one came later, or which one's more valuable, but I have the traditional comic green Mysterio. His paint scheme fares a little bit better than Shocker, but there are still some slop lines, mainly at the boot tops and the diamonds, where his Egyptian eyes would be, which actually served to form the gimmick, as you can see. He has your traditional 1990s sculpt, where it's a little over-muscular, and I really do believe people like the Mysterio don't really need muscles, unless it's just, you know, body armor to fool those he's trying to perform the illusions on, the ones that he's trying to trick. But one thing I really did love about this guy was his mist sprayers on his hands are fully painted. And he's got ones on his boots that, once again, are also fully painted. And, of course, his cape is removable. It just pegs right into the back of his head, like so. And as you can notice, there is a back. There's a big hole in the back, and here's why. This guy is a water sprayer, and as such, you need to put water into his back. Instead of like this little tiny little hole, like the Joker review I did in years past, he comes with this insanely large water squirter. And this is where the figure actually has a lot going wrong for it. Because they wanted to use a ridiculously long squirter instead of a backpack or just some water running through the tube, they had to put a hole into his back. Now, I can understand putting a hole into his back on a caped figure because you could just, put the cape on and hide it. Well, not here. Now you actually, because in order to keep the cape on, to fire the gimmick, they put a big hole in the cape. So now it just looks like he has this freaking hole in his back that someone just basically blew him away. So if you ever wanted to kill Mysterio before Kevin Smith did, well, now's your chance. Before we get on to that, I did notice that, yes, he does have a nice little fishbowl, and it does have this nice little green paint wash, almost kind of like a snow globe effect. It's really, really cool. Okay, now for the gimmick. What you want to do is you want to take your squirt bottle, and you want to put it in some water, fill it up, and you take your figure, and notice that you can't go in any other way. This goes onto the bottom, this goes here, so you stick your right in there, and you spray water. The gimmick does not work all that well. As you can see, it barely goes. It barely goes half an inch before falling. So the gimmick kind of fails on its own. That kind of sucks. It's a shame that you actually get a figure with an action feature that doesn't really work all that well, especially in the 90s, which was arguably one of the more inventive times of action figures. I still like this figure for what it is. It was a favorite of mine as a kid, and if I ever wanted him to use his little squirting mist action, I just used my imagination. I pretended. That's pretty much what this is. Another little accessory that Mysterio came with was his personalized villain pin. These collector's pins were really, really cool. X-Men had trading cards. Batman figures had nothing. They had loads of accessories. But X-Men, they had their trading cards, and Spider-Man had pins. And these little pins had nice little collective artwork of the figure, their name, and then, of course, a little safety clasp. Basically, you just held on to a fabric of clothing and then push this thing down. Wasn't really all that effective. It would pop these things off, but they didn't want to give kids safety pins. God knows, it was the 90s. Everyone was just now realizing that lawyers ruled the world, and they were suing for pretty much anything. See McDonald's and the hot coffee cup, case. But I digress. Mysterio has been one of my personal favorite characters since I've pretty much been reading Spider-Man comics, and his appearances on the television series were always something I look forward to. I really, really do love this character. He made his very first appearance in Amazing Spider-Man number 13 way back in 1964, where he, just very bored with his illustrious stuntman career, decided to frame Spider-Man and become the hero of New York by bringing him in. Spider-Man found out of his plans, exposed him as a fraud, and now Quentin Beck blames old Webhead for starting his supervillain career, even though he robbed the bank that framed Spider-Man to begin with, but whatever. After being regarded as a A-lister in the 60s, he became kind of B-villain status into the 70s and 80s. And Kevin Smith killed him off in Daredevil Volume 2, number 6 or number 7, by blowing his freaking head off. He has now been resurrected, so to speak, and is now a mainstay in the Spider-Man series. Before I go on too long, I'd just like to say that this is, it's a nice little figure. The gimmick doesn't work all that well, but for a classic figure like Mysterio, and for those of you who love the original animated series and would like to collect something from it, I'd say he's a worthy addition to your collection. Probably not as fun as Shocker, but definitely a more interesting looking character. And this is Trans801L, and I am signing off.